Hey guys, it's Frederik from the FWX podcast. I want to talk to you guys about some interesting advice that you can use if you are writing a story. And I'm going to talk about out of the box kind of things. And specifically when you get very creative with it and when you get very wacky with it. And so I'll do that in a moment, but first I'd like to inform you that you can like this video. You can also subscribe to the channel. Both of those things will help us get up more into the algorithm of YouTube, and that allows more people to watch the podcast and become more available to many more people as well. Um, Also important for you to know is that I am not a native English speaker, and so on occasion I might still fumble over a word or mispronounce something or get something wrong. And it's important for you guys to know that that is absolutely just human. So now that that is out of the way, let's talk about getting wacky with it. And I'd like to start this by going over two projects that I rewatched that have a good explanation, or I can give you an explanation for getting very wacky with it. And we'll also talk a bit about movies and genres and all of that goodness. All right, so first, I'm gonna make myself a bit smaller here, and we'll talk about what we got here on the screen. I'm gonna start with this one. You may know What If because I've talked about it before in my zombies video. And this is a series from Disney Plus. I'm sorry, from Marvel for Disney Plus. It's part of the MCU. And it's really about when one thing is different from everything else and how that changes your story. And part of this is also bound to the MCU, of course, because the whole aspect of becoming a variant or different timelines leads to characters being very different. Like one of the sentences that they actually say is one moment in time, a different decision can mean change for the rest of your life. And that's not exactly the quote, but that's basically what it means. And also, very obviously, here with this show, it is also about the multiverse and variants. Like you see here prominently with Captain Carter, who is the lead person of this show. Because, so in the show, if you have seen it, you're you're good. If you haven't seen it, I'm gonna spoil some things now. So to start with, in the very beginning of the show, in What If, we get to see a change in the past during the during World War II, where they have to keep up with the science to get a super soldier. And for a change, it is not Steve Rogers, but Peggy Carter that becomes the captain. In this case, that also involves a name difference, of course. Captain Carter. Obviously, a lot of people also associate her with Captain Britain, which is yet another version of Captain America from the comics originally. And Peggy Carter being British, of course, kind of alludes to that idea. But in effect, she is more a variant of Steve than that she is part of the Captain Britain stuff, because that's a whole different thing, actually. It's just that the visual of her makes for a bit of confusion for people who don't know. So it's basically like a gender bend, really, when a character is normally a male, they do a gentleman to a woman, or to the other way around, or to something else. For instance, another example from this, not from this show, is from the Loki series, where we get not just a whole different amount of Lokis in the form of uh, Tom Hiddleston, but also a crocodile Loki, which is crazy in and of itself. Another good example from this, and I'm gonna bring up another picture here for a moment. Gonna use this one for a moment. So obviously this is Tom Holland's Spider-Man in the MCU, and I'm gonna use this one for example because there is that whole Spider-Verse universe where there are so many different Spider-Mans, and I do mean that plural because there's a gentleman version of him. There's a clone version, Ben Riley from the comics. You have an older version who also happens to be my favorite from that universe, and that also talks a lot about being from a different universe and being a different version of a character. And that is basically what I'm trying to say here as well, is that when you think outside of the box for a story, you can also get really wacky. Like, usually, I'm gonna get this screen back for a moment, so just a second. Yeah, okay. So, what I'm talking about here is that usually when we read a story, it's often a man or a woman, or in some cases, an animal or a creature. But with the idea of like different universes, different variants, you can go pretty far in that regard. Like, I've also talked about creatures and folklore, like building a whole background, a whole story around a person can lead to the point where you can actually say, oh, this isn't just like a person, a human, or an animal, or a creature, but go really wacky. Like, another place I want to mention here for a moment is Star Wars. Star Wars has aliens, a ton of alien species, which is also another thing I've talked about. And you can also create an entire species of your own if you like that kind of thing. And that is the key thing here. You can create many, many things, like those examples I just gave. At the end of the day, you kind of have to do what you want to, and that can mean a bunch of different things. And I've talked about archetypes before, and you can, by the way, all find those videos about all the things I'm mentioning here on the backlog on YouTube here. And you can really get really not just wacky, but also very silly with it. Like, I remember a while ago, I was watching a walkthrough for a video game. It's called Split Fiction, and there's a part in that game where it got very silly for a moment where you have to play as a pig, having to go through a pig farm and mud and a lot of bouncy platformy stuff. And initially I was like, what the fuck is this for family movie thing? But it kind of worked. Gets pretty silly when you're acting with a when you're in that case not acting but playing a figure like a pig or so many different things. Another example I'm thinking of right now is in the Everything Everywhere All at Once movie, where all of a sudden we get like two rocks talking to each other through those balloons that we get, like pop-up balloons for in comics, like people saying something to each other without actually moving their mouths, like one saying to the other, like Anna, Anna. And that is incredibly silly, but it kind of works within the context of the story. And by the way, amazing movie. Became one of my favorite movies of the past 5 years, actually, and even overall. And so I'm really down to this idea of people actually getting wacky with and silly and hell, even absurd. Like throughout every measure, throughout every concept, every genre that you know, and create something completely yourself that is not just bound to the concept of one thing, but multiple things. And I'm making a 4 or 2 peace signs here because you can do so many stuff, of course, and there's more stuff I want to talk about now. So I'm gonna get myself a bit smaller again. Okay, next thing I want to talk about. Gonna get those pictures out of the way for a moment. So one of the other preparation things I made right now, I saw, is the Kingsman movie, the first one. This title is, of course, in French for a moment, but it's Kingsman: The Secret Service. It's with all these characters. Of course, you'll notice a bunch of these actors. You got Taron Egerton here. You got Colin Firth. You got I'm forgetting Baldy's head here for a moment. You got, of course, Samuel L. Jackson, Michael Caine, Sofia Boutella, and the thing with Kingsman that really got me thinking about doing something out of the box, because the main thing here is that they take a concept like spy thrillers to the extreme in terms of especially bloody, and you, you see this very evidently in this movie where the blood just splattering everywhere, and in a bit different way than like a Tarantino movie where it almost splashes onto the camera that is filming everything. And also, they do a lot of extreme stunts. There's a great performances from the actors that I just talked about, all of them here, all of these folks. And also, a bit of a side role here. It's not on this picture right now, but Mark Hamill is also in this movie in a side role as a professor. And so they really get not gory, but very bloody. There's extreme action. There is extreme stunt work as well. Obviously, the key thing to talk about also in this movie is, of course, those church scenes with the action sequence. And obviously, I'll leave the politics of that for a moment, but it is a crazy sequence of Winston and reaction after reaction where you're just like, oh my god. And it's kind of amazing in of itself. So you just can absolutely go loco with these kinds of things. And that's why I'm saying here, of course, just a second. Yeah, so you can go absolutely nuts with this kind of thing. And that is up to you, of course. That is in terms of what kind of story you want to make. That's completely up to you, of course. And but that is also what tends to get to people when something is authentic and original. And I'm highly in favor of those kinds of things. And I hope you do too. No, it will make it short for this video. So, guys, thank you so much for listening and watching to this episode of the FWX podcast. Before I go, you can like and subscribe to this channel. I'm gonna repeat that for a moment. So you can like this video, you can subscribe to the channel. Both those things helps us get close to the top, gets us up in the numbers, and that makes it more available for people to watch the FWX podcast. So thank you so much, and I will be seeing you in a future video. See ya.